This is Alexa Linton, and you're listening to the Whole Horse Podcast. We're now in season 6. Thanks to all of you tuning in and sharing the podcast with your friends to keep the momentum going. This podcast is dedicated to all things horse and all things that uplift equine well-being and welfare. And I'm having down-to-earth conversations with equine professionals about the little things that move the dial slowly but surely towards a better world for horses. You'll find all the episodes, 93 and counting now, on iTunes, Spotify, and wherever you get your podcast. Thanks for being here and enjoy the ride. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Whole Horse Podcast. You're here again for season 6, and we're into 2023. And as always, I have a guest here that I'm very excited to be talking with. I'm here with Celeste Lazaris, and I think I pronounced that wrong, and I apologize.
That's okay. I'm pretty sure it's how everybody always pronounces it. And my husband's like, it's Lazaris, it's Greek. And I'm like, yeah, babe, but it's spelled Lazarus. So I don't really, it's cool. But yeah, that's okay.
Even before I attempted to get it right, and yeah, that's okay. So I'm really excited to have you here, Celeste. We're going to dive into it, but I really would love to open up to you for any of my listeners that don't know you, don't know your work. Just, little nutshell version of who you are, how you got to this point today with horses.
Yeah. God, it's always such a loaded question.
Totally.
I mean, I was your typical horse crazy little girl. I grew up with all the Bryars. My mom was very good about making sure that I always had some kind of horses in my life. And we were very, very poor. And so I had very slim pickings on what I could ride and what I got opportunities to. And it didn't matter. I was just like totally obsessed with any and every option that I could do. And then my mom actually suffered quite a bit with drug and alcohol abuse. And so I ended up in the foster care system. And one of the last homes, I got pinged around quite a lot. But one of the last homes that I was in was a home that was centered around rehabbing horses from troubled issues. And they tended to use troubled kids with the troubled horses. And so I got to learn a lot about emotional regulation. And that was where I got my start in actually training. I'm sure, in hindsight, it wasn't like actually training, but it was, we would get jobs of training horses. And so it was really neat. And then, I was hooked, and I am a adrenaline junkie by nature. So jumpers was a great thing, barrel racing, and shooting, playing with cows, basically anything that it was like fastest clean wins, not a lot of politics. And again, because I didn't have a lot of finances growing up, my one horse had to do everything. So like my horse was ended up being my 1D barrel horse. He was also my meter 20 jumper. He was also my mounted shooter. He also rode in parades. Like it's, and I very much grew up with the lens of, if a horse is correctly developed and if a horse had a good relationship with their person, it was very like the whole discipline segment didn't make sense to me. So that was that. And then I have always had a knack for really gnarly behavior cases, probably because I was a really gnarly behavior case growing up, right? Like I feel like we tend to, we're able to regulate with those horses a lot better. We're able to see them with a little bit of a softer lens, having been victims of things. And so that was my biggest knack, and I was really well known for it. And then I got introduced to body work, and I was like, man, body work's not a real thing, blah, 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 the total skeptic about it. I don't even get massages. My horses don't need massages, And this lady knew that I had a lot of interesting, aggressive cases in my barn. And she was like, I'll give a free demo, give it a shot, take it or leave it, just see what you think. So she's like, give me the toughest horse in your barn. So you're the toughest horse in my barn. And the majority of the behavior cases that the horse came in with, I did quotations for those who can't see, came in with were gone. And it was like the first of what I called my ego eradicating moments, where I was like, okay, well, maybe that was a fluke. Maybe we had a really good training session that day. So like, maybe it was good. Mm-hmm. And and then she came back the next time, and I paid for it, and I had her do a couple more horses, and it was the same thing. And I was like, holy shit, like, okay, so behavior is actually pain and discomfort. It's not poor training, or it's not the horse has an attitude problem, or all of these things that I grew up. And I was a very mindful horse trainer, but I still had that lens, right, that we're raised with. And so that really, knocked me down quite a lot. And I was like, okay, so from here on forward, my contribution to my business and to the Horse Society is that I'm going to have this lady work on all of my horses when they come into the training program. I'm not going to work with them until then. Then that way I know that like they're good and like we're good and everything's good. And that worked really well for a long time. And I had like crazy success. And like I was already successful, but that like skyrocketed me. So like, what's your secret? And like, my secret weapon is body work. And then her business blew up quite a lot, and she couldn't come as often as I needed her for stuff. And so she just offered to train me to work on my own horses. So I did that. And then in comes your second ego eradicating moment, which as you as a body worker, you're going to appreciate this, but it's one thing to, to have somebody else work on your horses and then you go and you do the things and it's fine. It's another thing when you're the one working on your horses and then you ride them and you train them. And then you start developing that feel and that eye that we get as a body worker. And to see that like after the rides, the horses, like those tension patterns were back in. And I was like, oh no, I can't do that anymore. And I, when I asked veterinarians, I asked her, I asked a lot of different body workers, and I was like, how do we, like, why isn't the horse better after we ride them? Like, why is it so much worse? And again, like, I have very kind hands. I have very, my tack fits well. I have a very like benign seat. Like there's nothing that's stand outish. Like if you were to watch me ride even back then, you wouldn't be like, oh my God, this person's like, some training you can see, but like, it was just like how the horses were moving through space, or like the fact that now knowing what I know now, the fact that I was asking the horses to do things that they were not developed to do. Right. So I was drilling movements versus actually trying to develop the body. And so I was asking all these people, and they were all, frankly, telling me that I was just stupid and that, it's fine. The horses are fine. Like they're not lame. They're not having any issues. And the body workers, even there was a little bit of that. Well, yeah, that's just kind of the nature of things. Like we come in and we do the band-aids and then the horses go to work and then they just, they need the body work for maintenance. I'm like, really? Like it just didn't sit right with me. And I was like, I just couldn't come to terms with the fact that my horses felt worse having been ridden. And I couldn't. And so after I asked enough people, enough questions, and nobody could give me an answer that I felt was good enough, I trashed my whole training business to the ground, and I said that I couldn't do it anymore. And I put myself in timeout and sent all my clients to other people. And I stopped taking and training horses, and I just quit. And I went back to I went to bodywork school, both for horses and humans, structural integration specifically. And that was fascinating to me. And I just decided that until I just needed to understand the bodies, and I needed to understand movement, and I needed to, I just started this like never ending quest, really. Well, it's still a quest, but I've at least figured out enough answers that now I'm back to training, which I appreciate, because I really am, like, at the heart of hearts, I'm a trainer. I love training. I love riding and competing, but I had to figure out how riding my horses and working my horses, I would get the same or at least similar responses that I would with body work. And so that's what I've done. That's the whole why we're here. Horses should be better because of their interactions with us, not despite it. So
yeah, absolutely. Reading on your website this frustration and hearing it now, this frustration with, and as a body work, I totally get this, where I work on a horse and I come back even a week later and they're exactly the same. Nothing's changed. Maybe they're worse. And these are horses that are, like you said, good tack, diet's pretty good. Things are pretty lined up, and they're getting, some of these horses injections, joint relief, all these things. And still
they've checked all the boxes,
and you come back and it's like, this is not working. Like, there's nothing quite so frustrating as feeling like you're putting a tiny bandage on something that is just a much bigger problem. And today we're going to talk more about the Balance Through Movement Masterclass, which I am now a part of. So it's kind of like, it's like this cool little, I feel like almost like a little guilty because I get to like ask you questions about what's going on. But I also know that, there's going to be people that are listening in that are in the masterclass or interested in it and going, what is this thing? Like, why do I want to be here? Right. Yeah. Or like, how does it help? And so I'm excited to dive in because I have to admit, when I started watching the videos and the masterclass, there was kind of like this moment, Celeste, of like, like in the cartoons when they're like, "Oh, like, why didn't I think of that?" It's kind of that moment of like, I've been doing body work for a long time. I think it's 20 years this year.
Wow.
On horses. And some of the pieces you brought in, I was like, oh my gosh, like this was right in front of my face. Like it was right there. And I just missed it.
It is, and it's not though. Like it's so, oh my God, like all the little things are so subtle and none of it's, I shouldn't say none of it. I'm sure maybe somewhere along the way it's talked about or trained about, but like I haven't come across it. No. You haven't come across it in 20 years, right? So like everything that I have figured out, like your dough moments that you had, I had 3 years of that. Like I wouldn't even talk to people about this, dude. Like I was like, I can't possibly even begin to tell anybody about these conclusions that I've come to because I was so annoyed with myself. I was annoyed with basically my entire life is a lie. It was like, you go through like all of these, oh God, it was terrible. And what it came down to and the answers of all of it is, but the horse says this is right. Mm-hmm. And it's like, I've had enough, and I don't call them problem horses anymore because they're just my teachers, but what they were labeled as problem horses, like those are my toughest cases. My dragon that I lost back in October, like he was such a teacher. And I mean, he's really what taught me a lot of this. And it's like, I had to sit and study him because nothing worked on him. Mm-hmm. No textbooks. I mean, I had the best, the top of the body workers you could get. I had UC Davis in my back pocket. I had, you name it, I had it. And nobody could fix him. Not that, I mean, that's not about fixing necessarily, but at least make him more comfortable. They didn't have any answers. And I finally just gave up and I just sat down and I just started watching him. And I was like, okay, what movements on your own make you sound? What movements make you unsound? And I traced that. And then I would dumb it down a little bit more. I'm like, okay, so in these movements, what muscles are you using that are making you more sound? And which ones are you seizing up that's making you unsound? And I traced those back and I played with it. And then I would go in and then I would intentionally ask him to do those similar things to see if I could get the same response. And he was always such a clear communicator. Yes, this, no, this. Yes, this, no, this. He was an ex-Mexican dancing horse. And so his panic that would come over him if you put him into a compromising situation or into a situation where he felt discomfort at the hand of you. So if I asked him to step sideways and it tripped a nerve or something, he would, anything that caused him discomfort because a human asked him to do something, he would snap and he would start doing this crazy pee off and biting the air. And it was just like, it was heartbreaking to watch. So I had to be so careful and so mindful, but because he was such a clear communicator about it, I had no room for error. And I also had there was no, what's the word? Like the feedback loop, right? So like when I would do something and it would help him, it was so obvious that it was the right answer. And so that became then my like trail guide to the horse's body. And then I would take that to other horses and I'd be like, yes or no, does this work? And then it would be a yes, and it would be a yes, and it would be a yes. And I was like, holy shit. Okay. So like, here are these movement patterns, and here are these more specifically, here are these movement patterns that we're being very mindful that these muscles are working and these ones are not. And that's how it should go into play. And it took me years to like dumb all of this down. I shouldn't say dumb it down, but I knew what worked and I didn't know why it worked.
Yep.
Right. And so it was like, okay, cool. But I'm not going to be able to get anybody on board if I can't tell them why it works. I can't just be like, hey guys, I have this thing. I have no idea, but we're going to fuck around and find out. Doesn't really work very well in the industry. So yeah, it's just been a lot of like then reverse engineering and reading a lot of textbooks. And some of the textbooks that I read are say things that the horse says are not true, or vice versa. And so I'm having to be very mindful of like trying to find out what it is, like why this works that's accurate has been
oh yeah,
harder than it should be.
Anatomy textbooks for horses and physiology and biomechanics. It's like, oh,
why do I read three different books and all three books say that the same muscle does something different? Like what?
Mm-hmm.
How is it? I don't know, dude. Like it's so complicated. And then you talk to other people and they're just like hell bent that one way is a thing. And I'm like, I don't know, dude. Like my horse says no. And I'm only doing this to fix this particular horse or to get him more comfortable because he's the love of my life and everybody else can just, it's cool that my business is blowing up. But really the only reason why I did this was to make him comfortable. So, here we are.
Well, I mean, cool side effect that you're making thousands of other horses also comfortable with your method. So, that's a pretty sweet legacy, I would say.
I think it's a beautiful legacy for him.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And I would love to, just from your point of view, I mean, I know this is a way bigger question, but the balance through movement method, how might you describe that to someone who like has no idea or is learning?
Oh Lord, I am learning. I apologize in advance to your listeners. So balance through movement method is something that I am still trying to put into words because I'm very, very bad at elevator pitches. I have found out I am not a good grown-up and I do not have good grown-up business lingo. And so I apologize for this being messy. I am trying to get better at it though. So the balance through movement method is an idea that we can use movement within the horse to balance their nervous system as well as to develop their bodies so that they can be innately balanced. The coolest thing about it, in my particular opinion, is that I use the exact same protocol, right? So we start with pillar 1, 2, and 3, and there's different exercises within pillar 1, within pillar 2, within pillar 3. Once the horses can do all of those exercises, then it turns into a cumulative like checklist, so to speak. So like while you're riding around, like, is your horse in pillar 1? Is it, or can you, if not, like, let's do a little bit of pillar 2, like little, checking in with 3. Like it just turns into a checklist because these are now exercises that the horses have already done, which tells me that their bodies can do that, right? So now it's fair to be a checklist. The same protocol, the same levels, the same things of going through all 3 things of the exercises, I use them for rehabilitation. So if I have a horse that comes in with kissing spine or EPM or you name it, some coming back from a bow tendon or a suspensory, I use the exact same things on that horse that I do with a baby horse that has never been developed, and we're just taking them through the levels to develop them so that we can start them. And I use, which is pretty crazy in its own right. And then I also use that same exact thing to teach veterinarians to use it for diagnostics. So we'll take the horse through those things and it will also come up with where the horse is struggling, what the range of motion is, is there an underlying pathology? If I ask my horse for pillar 1, so if I ask them to turn off their brachiophalicus, right, and to click into their body or their iliopsoas, depending on what's going on front or hind, if the horse suddenly comes up landing toe first, that would be a clue in, like, to check in. And then there's other things that we can do within 2 and 3, but we can laser focus within 1, 2, and 3. We can laser focus if the horse is having issues in their cervical spine, if it's something that's in the foot, is it something that's in their sacrum? And so you have these horses that come in with undiagnosed lameness, and people are like, I don't know, like sometimes they're off in the left front, sometimes they're off in the right hind. Like, we don't really know what's going on. We take them through the levels, looking at it from a diagnostic lens instead of a developmental lens or instead of a rehabilitation lens. And all of a sudden we cut our chasing the tail of $10,000 of diagnostics to boom, we're going to get an x-ray of C7, boom, we're going to get an x-ray of, left front. And that's so cool. And so to me, the fact that the same movements and the same methodology can be used for rehab, for pure development of a good structured horse, to diagnostics is like pretty rad. And that's what tells me that it's true in terms of what the body needs, because that's just, it wouldn't work that way if it wasn't. So.
Yeah. And these are the things that I'm just sort of starting my journey of understanding. with my mare, telling you a little bit about her. Very interesting case study in terms of this work.
Mm-hmm.
And, the clients that I see, I saw a little mare with head shaking syndrome the other day, 6 years old. Interestingly enough, was a little bit, I would say, and we'll talk about this in a little bit, not fully unfurled at birth. But then had the added bonus of being kicked in the brachiocephalicus when she was like 5 days old.
Yeah.
So
that didn't help.
That did not help particularly, no. And so this incredible amount of change in that, on that side particularly. But, now that I'm looking at this, seeing, okay, we can see all these different places and how a horse uses themselves well. Yeah. Right. Mm-hmm. It was such a revelation to hear, we have to turn off that brachiocephalicus to engage and activate these other muscles. And I've seen it over and over as a body worker. I mean, brachiocephalicus is a muscle, I think it was literally the first muscle I learned in equine therapy school.
Right.
Because
but nobody tells you that it's antagonistic to the swing because nobody else knows that.
Never learned that.
I love it because I'm seeing other people now and they're just like, oh my God, I'll see people I don't even know them and they're posting and they're commenting that. And I'm like, I wonder where you got that from.
Totally. I mean, it was definitely an aha. Oh my gosh, that makes so much sense given, the attachment sites and what it does. And, but this is like what I was saying, is like these small things that you've uncovered that is like, oh my gosh, right. Yeah, of course this is happening. Of course we see these horses with ewnecks and all this underdevelopment, or asymmetrical development in the neck. And, of course we're seeing horses with front end lameness and all these things that are happening because they're not utilizing this part of their body properly. So yeah, it's been like a really big, big shift for me. And, I would love to get into a little bit more. I mean, going back to this, because one of my like ahas was when you talked about babies not unfurling properly. And that was also something I was like, nobody taught me this. This is a thing.
Right. Well, that's how I still feel that way. Cause there's people, like if you Google, I wish I had her name. I totally give her props. If you Google, equine birth trauma, there are people, there's one, it's a lady. And I want to say she's a vet physiotherapist, but it's like the first page still pop up. So everybody should just Google it and find out. But like her whole page is dedicated to, she's got a big thing that's about equine, the foals that aren't like birth trauma. That's what it is. So equine birth trauma. And I was like, that's so cool. And so that was where I was looking at it and I'd come across a study it's published in a veterinary journal. And it was back in like 1993. I want to say it was a minute ago. Wow. And so here we have a published study all the way back in 93 where the people were saying approximately 1 in 5 foals are born with fractured ribs. How is this not common knowledge right now in 2022? Wow. 23, right? Like it's crazy. And I'm like, so these guys went through, unless somebody has gone back and has since proven that wrong, but I've not found any of that data. So I don't think that that's true. And I will tell you from all of the full, because I took a whole year and I was like, let me work on all your babies. No charge. I just want to put my hands on the babies. I want to find out. So what I screwed up is I thought, I'm a big believer. So like I fix a lot of spinal integrity and a lot of issues through opening the shoulder. So I'm a big believer in the shoulders and the thoracic sling. Where I screwed up is I never actually felt the rib cage. I wasn't looking at the ribs. I was looking at the shoulders. So in all the babies that I was playing with, I would say, about 1 in 5 foals had one shoulder that had pretty significant asymmetry. One shoulder was, not as unfurled as the other. And what now I wish, and now I've gone back a couple of times having read that study. I've had my opportunity to put hands on ribs and I can feel that the horses or the foals that have the asymmetry in the shoulders, they do have something funky in the ribs. Now, obviously I don't have an imaging system. I can't go in and take pictures, but I could palpate and be like, you know what? I bet that was a fracture. Like that makes sense to me. And I've had fractured ribs. So if you have fractured ribs, you develop, especially if they're upper ribs, you can't not develop a little bit of frozen shoulder because you're trying to stabilize and isolate that side. So now we have foals that come out, 1 in 5 foals born with fractured ribs. It's always the upper ones. Usually they've got some kind of a pelvis thing too, which does obviously like that would also screw them up. And then they develop over time this like, okay, well, I can't move the side. I have to stabilize. I'm a flight animal. I want to make sure that I don't get picked out of the herd, right? So I'm just not going to move the shoulder much so that people don't see that I'm in pain or that the lions don't see that I'm in pain. And then they develop atrophy in that right side, which then correlates to we get high-low, right, in their feet because their grazing pattern now has changed. We get shortness of stride. If it comes in, they've lost abduction now. And if you lose abduction, you also lose extension. If you lose extension in a front limb, you have to compromise and lose extension in a hind limb. Now we have this weird topsy-turvy shit going on throughout the spine. And it's like this huge thing. But it also makes sense why when I unlock a shoulder, the rest of the body just goes, okay, yeah, cool, got it. Because that was actually the core issue. And so you give the horse back that range of motion and you restore this gait abnormality, right? And you put that back into functional movement. And then the body goes, oh, thank God. Okay, I'm good now. And it self-heals.
So when you see something like that I'll use the example of my Raven, who's now 8, so she was diagnosed with arthritis in her front left at age 4. So is that something that you've seen to be supported through the pillars and that work?
Yeah, 100%. My 19-year-old horse has had high-low the entire time. I purchased him at 18 months old. At 18 months old, he had high-low. And he's always been a little bit tricky to saddle fit. And now, again, hindsight 2020, he had asymmetry through the shoulders, but nobody ever looked at the shoulders. Nobody ever talked about like, hey, we need to like develop his left front a little bit so that it wasn't even a conversation. It was just, he just seems like a shim on that side. Horses are, most horses have asymmetry. This is a normal thing, blah, blah, blah. And so it's like, yes, it's normal. And it's not just because it's normal doesn't mean it's correct. Right. But yeah, at 19 years old, I had my aha moment about, oh shit, this thing that you've been dealing with your whole life. And I started doing the pillars with him, and within 6 months his hoofs started growing in differently and his shoulders started changing. 19 years old. And this has been he was my everything horse. He was my poor man's horse, right? That like, and he's a fantastic horse. I shouldn't even call him that, but he had to do everything. He had to compete in everything for me. So it's not like he doesn't have a lot of mileage. Like, we've got a lot of mileage. That poor animal was the sum of all of my mistakes. And he still was like, yeah, Mom, totally cool. We should do something different. All right. And the first time I did pillar 1 with him, it was so crazy because he had a little bit of a come apart, understandably so, because that was his cane, particularly on that side for a long time. But he stood there and he just processed and processed and processed and processed. And then he like went over and he just lay down and you just watched him be like, oh my God, I could do. Like for him, pillar 1 was the workout for him because just practicing taking away that cane and bringing it back, taking away that cane and bringing it back was such a big deal for him. But he felt so much better afterwards that he came back to the party. He was so excited to see me. And like, this is a horse that we had a good relationship, but I wouldn't say that he was ever like loved being ridden. Like he doesn't. He's just like, man, like, okay, like I'll do my thing, but like, he's not going to like run to be the first one to get picked. And when I started doing the pillars with him, he would literally like fight off through the horses. He's like, no, I want in. Like whatever we did last time, let me have it. And it was so, again, that's a very validating experience, right? Like, oh, like I'm making you feel so good. You want to play with me. Right?
Yeah.
So yeah, at 6 years old, totally redeemable.
Yeah.
Like obviously I can't say anything about like arthritis and things like that, but in terms of the asymmetry and things, I mean, I think my overall view on bodies, and I say this, I have a lot of clients that come to me and their horses have like ECVM or something that's pretty gnarly, right? PSSM, kissing spines, all of it. And I say the same thing about all of them is I go into it not assuming that this is going to work. I just go into it saying, hey, I have this thing. It might help. let's give it a shot. And we start taking them very slowly through the process. If at any point in time something comes up and it's like, that's too much, they can't, because I will be perfectly honest with you. If you took away all of my compensatory patterns, I would not be able to walk.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I don't think that compensatory patterns are innately wrong. And asking the horse to only go around in functional movement all the time, like they might not be able to. They might have something underlying that says that will lame me up. And so you take this work and you play with it and you try to support and develop them as much as you can. And just to see what the body can do to heal. And, you know, the results most of the time are pretty amazing. When you say humans are the same way, if we can set up our bodies for as much success as possible to then, for lack of a better term, to support our disability, that's kind of the best, versus just throwing the body to the wayside and say, oh, well, it's disabled, it has this thing, like it can't get any better. I would prefer to try to train the body to support the disability. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I mean, it's cool to see that.
Wonderful. Yeah. You know, the other piece that really grabbed me, I mean, we see sort of like, it's called the traditional ways of moving horses. And one of them, of course, is lunging. You know, it's like the first thing people go to is like, I put my horse on a circle. We do the thing in various ways, like in countless different training methods. This is what happens. And that was another aha, was the sense, oh, a horse has leads in the walk and the trot and the canter. Like, yes, this makes so much sense. These horses that we are constantly, get your nose in here, you're not paying attention.
Right.
And recognizing, oh, like that's not them not paying attention. That's them not able to hold the correct lead on this circle and trying to find their way with a movement pattern that's really actually hard on them.
Right. Yeah. It was, you know, and that was another one. Like, I mean, I lunged my horses all the time. That was what you do. You go to competitions, you take the fire breathing dragons out, you lunge them, you do the thing. And it wasn't until my mare is actually the one that taught me that. I put her in the round pen loose, which I was doing like, and it was, you know, again, I'm diving down this path of like, okay, like what's going on, asking questions. And she would not go to the right. And I was like, this mare is extremely athletic. But this really crazy thing happens when you start listening to your horses. I don't know if you've experienced this or not, but like you'll have the same horses for like your whole life. And then all of a sudden you start actually listening to them and hearing them out. And then they start telling you things that you're like, oh, do I really want to hear that? Like, we just go back to like that ignorant thing where you just did what I asked because, you know, no. Okay. And so at this point in time, I'd begin listening to her. And so we're going around and I'd ask her to go to the right and she would not go to the right. She'd like go and then she'd stop and she'd spin back the other way. And I'm like, that's really weird. And then she'd go to the left and she could go around pretty good. But when I would make her go to the right, I'd really like cut her off. I'm like, no, like we need to go this way. When we go to the right, she was like countermount the whole time. And I was like, that's so weird. Like I didn't really notice, but I wasn't really paying attention. Again, I assumed she just wasn't paying attention to me. Oh, you're looking to the outside. You're ignoring me, blah, blah, blah. And it was, I don't often hear like voices in my head. That kind of communication. I'm getting a little bit better. I've taken a lot of courses, but this was the first time that I've ever heard, like, I mean, sat me down and, you know, really scolded me. And it was like the seventh time I tried this. And finally she stopped and she wheeled around and she was like, what part of I can't is confusing to you? And I was like, did I say that? And she's just standing there staring at me like, it's my black mirror, it's on my profile photo. And I was like, try it again. And she was like, what part of I can't is confusing you right now? Like, I'm not sure how much more clear I can make this. And I was like, this is arguably the most athletic horse I've ever seen. Like, I purchased her because I thought that she would make my, like, she could do like the NFR barrels. Like, she's so talented. And I'm like, what do you mean you can't go to the right on a very big circle? And it was that she couldn't do it. She couldn't. And so like, and I'm checking her out. So now my body worker lens comes on, right? So I'm like, okay, I'll find what's wrong. So I'm going over her body. I'm like, she probably has a pinched nerve somewhere. There's some like thoracic outlet-y thing, whatever. And I'm nothing there. I can't palpate anything wrong with her. And then finally I'm looking at her shoulders and I'm looking at her shoulders and I'm like, I really never noticed that your left shoulder is like way more sunken in than your right one. Like, that's so crazy, which means if she goes around to the right, she would have to motorcycle in because horses don't fall to the inside, right? They don't have access to that outside. So because she couldn't abduct, because she doesn't have that range of motion to the left shoulder, she would then fall in. And then if I made her look to the inside instead of looking to the outside, she had to collapse her spine into her scapula. And so there went her spinal integrity. And she was like, you're making this big deal about everybody being balanced and whatever, and you're not even paying attention to the fact that I can't do this. So you're trying to have me go this way, and it's screwing me up. And here we are.
Oh
and I was gosh. Like, okay, now I'm fired again. So I'm going to put myself back in timeout and figure out how to do this. And so Maze is the one that taught me how to do static pillar 3, which is how do we get the horse at a standstill, because they're not functional enough to do a circle yet. Like, she is not developed enough to go in a circle. It hurts her. It physically hurts her to do it. So we have to come all the way back and start doing these sets, essentially, of like a one-handed push-up almost, of how do we isolate and develop this one set of muscles so that over, 6 to 8 weeks or however long it takes, we can then actually ask her to do a circle and it's fair and she can do it balanced. And so, yeah, she taught me that one.
Man, gosh, you gotta love a black mare.
Gotta love a black mare. Yeah, she's very, very different teacher than my dragon was, but she still, nonetheless, right? She's like, no, you wanted to hear it, so what are you gonna do about it? And I was like, I'm gonna respect it. I'm so sorry. I don't know anything. Constantly.
Man, a big thank yous to her for that as well,
right?
Because how many horses are dealing with this? I mean,
exactly.
I'm sure we've got listeners out there just nodding their heads going, like, that bad side that your horse just can't, doesn't want to do. And we often label it as, they're being disrespectful or lazy or, insert word here. And
sometimes the rider gets blamed for it. Sometimes it's like, oh, well, you're just really bad to the rider. You're really crooked to the right. I'm like, yeah, the rider falls into the left all the time in that left strap because there isn't a left shoulder to support them. Right. And so not that the rider shouldn't be more mindful, but it's also not always the rider's fault either. Like, sometimes the being that you are on is quite undeveloped and the asymmetry is not there. And so that is going to throw you off balance. It doesn't matter how well balanced of a rider you are. So it's just, there's lots of lenses to look at, lots of different check boxes to make. And, and Dragon's the one that taught me about pillar 1 because it's in the textbooks, it says that the brachiophalicus is used to draw the limb forward. And so there's a lot of textbooks that say that it's used to draw the limb forward in extension. So it's an extensor muscle. That's absolutely not correct. Then there's other ones that say that it's for protraction. And I could get on board with that. I think that it's an assisted for protraction. But I'll have to share with you. I have a photo of him. He was hypermobile. He's Andalusian, but he was hypermobile Andalusian. And he was talking smack to a horse that was next to him, and he squealed. He's Italian. He squealed and he pawed, and his whole forearm is like completely over the top of. I mean, like, it's freaky because he was that mobile, and his brachiophalicus is off the entire time. And I was like, so you tell me what muscle is using there, because it wasn't that one. Like, it wasn't that. And when that muscle was, so again, having stallions are really fun because stallions are not all horses like play within their drives, but stallions are very expressive, right?
Yes.
And so when he was in his play drive or his like, hey, baby, sexy time with the mare drive, that was when he did the most spectacular movements. And those movements that I was like, oh God, I can't anything to sit on him while you're doing that. And the whole time he was doing those movements, his brachiophalicus was off. It was not, or in, whatever saying off is kind of a layman's term. Like, it wasn't in contraction. It wasn't in that concentric contraction. So, but it was off and it was all jello-y and loose. And so when that muscle was off, he was completely sound and he had full range of motion. And then something would happen, like a truck would go by and it would scare him and he'd seize it back up again. And then he'd take off and then he would be lame and the movement would be restricted. And so I watched this over and over again. And I was like, y'all can call me crazy all you want, but I'm watching this every single day. And then I started playing with it and getting a horse, as you probably come into terms while you're in the masterclass. It's not easy to get a horse in pillar 1. It's not an easy feat. And it's not, everyone's like, oh, well, she just teaches to put the head down. And that's just, everybody tells that. I'm like, okay, that's not what we're talking about. And it's really hard. And that's why I think it has gotten, people know the idea, like there's an idea of like where to put the horse's head for optimum, you know. And I think what they're chasing is the brachiophalicus. They've just not really narrowed it down yet. So like here, there you go. There's my contribution to society. I've given that to you. But what's difficult is that you can't force it.
Yep.
So that's where human ego has a hard time. And so I know we're going to chat about the Masterclass a little bit, but like one of the things that I get a lot of heat for is that I don't give out how-to videos on how to do it. And I'm working up to it for like the Pillars course that I'm doing, but I will tell you that Pillar 1 has 16 modules currently. So if that's any indication, it's like how much goes into it, because you cannot force this posture because it has everything to do with the horse's parasympathetic state. It has to do with their ability to feel safe. And it has to do with how much of the muscle they can turn off at one time, because they can turn off the lower attachments and then seize up the upper attachments all day long. It's not hard for them. And so it's really an art form to be able to play with it. And so the way that I've tried to design the masterclass is, and there are some people that have come in and they've been like, yep, nope, this sucks. I want a refund. Like there's not enough how-to videos. I want how-to videos, and that's fine. And I give them that. And I'm like, but how do I say this nicely? If you come into it and all you want to know is a step-by-step how-to video on how to do this with your horses, you do not probably have the patience that it takes to sit with your horse and get them to actually do Pillar 1.
Mm-hmm.
Like, because it's hard. It's a very hard thing. So, I mean, what are your experiences around that?
Yeah, it's been so interesting with Raven. Like I said, probably not unfurled. I think she had an accident maybe when she was a baby. Bad gut stuff. Like she's just, and her mom was bred by her nephew while she had a terrible hock injury. So it's kind of like just a parody of errors. Like it's just like
there's like so much.
Oh honey. So I actually met her as a body worker. I was called in to work with her when she was about, I think she was 4 or 5, and she's lovely. She's a Canadian mare, purebred. So that has its own thing.
They're beautiful though.
They're so beautiful and so much personality. Like she's just so cool. She got her name because she would play with a raven in her paddock every day. Like that's who she is, right? She's playful. But what I'm finding with, coming back to Pillar 1, so when I first started doing body work on her, one of the things that she had was this crazy sternum that stuck out from her chest, and was so, in osteopathic terms, we call it compacted. So she had all these intraosseous lesions. It was like a rock, essentially. And then a real distortion in her thorax and just a lot. And she would get that left front, right hind, she's kind of a classic case. And I find when I ride her, even a small amount, she's much more lame, of course. And so what I've been finding with Pillar 1 is something that has really been this key, because for the 2+ years I've had her, I've been avoiding contact with her because she gets so upset. The minute you try to ask for contact through any sort of like halter or even bitless bridle, I have a cavesson that's like really flat leather. She starts shaking her head, resisting, getting mad. And I just started doing stuff like I would do target training when we did our work together to ask her to drop, to relax. But of course she can't maintain it. So she'll hit the target and come back up and hit the target and come back up. And so as soon as I saw that, I'm like, oh, okay, here we are. here we are
Yeah.
in the shit
Well,
of this
right.
thing that we've avoided for our entire relationship together because we can, and she's basically unridden, but I want her to live a long time. And she's at, you know, in the trajectory she's in right now, she's going to be too sore to have a really long, happy life. Right.
Yeah.
And that's where I kind of got, I can't, you know, continue to let the degradation happen because she can't use her thoracic sling. And that's kind of been, so we are in pillar 1 in the muck at the moment. She has moments where she can accept some contact, and I can feel the relaxation, and I can feel her finding her center of balance. And then other moments, like the other day I was working with her, and she's like, I can't do this.
Sure.
And so we're coming back and forth. We're sort of ebbing and flowing into, and it was very interesting. Actually, it was resistance. And then we had snow and various things. And I didn't work with her for like 2 weeks. And then I went back to working with her, and she was like, I got this. I went, it's a miracle. I could feel it. And then it shifted back where it was like, oh, this is hard. And so that's where we're at the moment, playing in that space. And
that's beautiful. Tara has, if you haven't already, so Tara is one of my trainers now, which I love so much.
Lovely.
For being completely honest, I fangirl quite hard over the fact that I get to have her as one of my trainers.
I would as well. Yeah.
Oh my God, she's spectacular, but she's really good for she's good for everybody, but she's very, very talented at stuff like that. So like if you've already done some Liberty and some Target stuff with her, what I love about what Tara brings to the table. So when we've done clinics together, because she understands the play drive so well, and she understands that nervous system, she can get the horses to get really interested in something and kind of bring out that energy. And so then the horse intrinsically falls into pillar 1. And it's beautiful to watch versus like the human. So horses that really struggle with contact, right? So Dragon was that way. It took us a long time for him. So when I started doing this with him, I didn't know Tara at the time. Otherwise, I think her approach would have been much faster than I did. But so for those that don't do the Liberty stuff, for him, it looked like I put the halter and the lead rope on, and our pillar 1 for a long time just looked like me gently picking up on the lead rope and then getting him to either soften in my direction or just is some kind of soften. It wasn't even soften. That wasn't looking to find that pillar 1 posture. It was just that. That's why we call it the relationship to connection, because it starts there. And so if I picked up on the rope, would he be okay to even soften towards my direction or soften to that thing? And if that was yes, that was all we did. So I would do a couple of those and then take the halter off, gone. Like sometimes the sessions would be 30 seconds. Sometimes they would be, 10, 15 minutes. It just kind of depends on the day. But I would just, every session was about, and then pretty soon I could touch the halter. And usually if I would touch the halter, he'd really freak out because he was like, oh, too much. And then, and then I would go back to the lead rope because that was something that he knew. And then I would inch my way back up. And then when he was okay with me just touching the halter and he could find some relaxation, that was that. And over time, it took me it's probably a good 3 months before I could put contact on the halter itself and ask for him to soften down. And again, when he would accept that, I wasn't getting the full pillar 1 position yet because we weren't even there yet. It was just, can you accept the contact? Can you accept the guidance? Because what pillar 1 is supposed to mean is that the horse has a positive relationship to connection, however you want to look at that, which really means more about the handler than it does the horse most of the time, right? So are you willing to sit with that? And are you willing to go out there and have absolutely no ego? You can't go out there and be like, I have to get my horse into this position because just like with Raven and like with Dragon, it took me 3 months before I could even potentially ask that question. So yes. It's not so easy. If I were to have gone out there and said, we're going to put your head in this position so you activate, you do your sling, he would have flipped himself over.
Totally.
There's nothing about that works. And so that's what makes it so beautiful and so very difficult. But once we got to the place that he could find pillar 1 and he could let me guide him into that, what that turned into then for him was that connection, well, and all the way through, because all that connection was supposed to be meaning was relaxation, was a soften.
Mm-hmm.
And so I call it coming into a receiving energy. And so horses are either, humans too, is we're either in a receiving energy or we're in a closed energy. It's one or the other. And so for humans, that can look like, you know, do you really want to go and hug that uncle that's always giving you the creeps? No, I'm in a closed energy. Do you want to go and eat that piece of cake? Fuck yeah, I want to go eat a piece of cake, right? And so so we get these really big, like, one's an open receiving energy, one's a closed energy. And horses have the same way. When horses are in a closed energy, the brachiosphalicus is on, right? It physically and energetically closes. When they're in receiving energy, it's open and they want to play, which is why it comes out in the breeding and in the playfulness and all that, because they're engaging in that connection. And so to me, and this is all the way up through the upper levels, I want my horses to feel, I want to train them that my connection to the reins, my connection to leader of everything, that contact should mean a signal for them that I want them to come back into that drive. That's it. And so, and then once I get them into that drive, then I can call up the energy into pillar 2, then I can mobilize the spine from pillar 3, and I can do all of that. But none of that works if they're not in a receiving energy. So that is like first and foremost at the forefront. And that is really freaking hard to teach people who just want a training and development lens. And I'm like, oh, a little bit more to that. Sorry.
It's a feel thing.
It's a feel thing.
And you can't, I mean, gosh, this has been the conundrum of training forever, hasn't it? You can't teach feel. It's like, it's a challenge to find that space in yourself. Like, it's like almost like the human needs to receive what's coming through that horse and what the messages that are, you know, like I know with Raven, that's been the biggest thing is like, can I also receive what she's experiencing and how that feels for her and what she's needing from me in this moment? Like your mare asked, right? Like, you know, that receiving energy. And that can be, I think, a very challenging place for us as humans to get to.
Fully. I mean, not to get like off on, you know, like human psychology, but I mean, if you think about it, I think one of the things that makes it so difficult is like how many of us get to have the luxury of going through our lives in a receiving energy, whether it's like going to the job that you don't want to do, or the laundry, or maybe the spouse that you're with puts you in a closed energy. As a mom, sometimes I'm in a closed energy a lot, right? Like they're very needy and I love my kids, but every once in a while I'm like, I really just want to pee by myself for 5 seconds. You know, and so when you hear the knock, knock, closed energy comes over. And so as a species who tend to operate out of vigilance and out of a closed energy most of the time, then to take that and take the time with our horses and to sit there and be like, okay, so obviously, you know, now we've got mirror neurons going on, so you can't be in a closed energy and your horse isn't going to fall. Like, it's not going to work, right? So it's, to me, I think it's such a, I've said this before and I'm sure people are going to get tired of me saying it, but I personally think it's really rad that my interpretation of the horse's body is this. In order for the horses to develop the correct muscles to make them a sound riding horse, right? They require us to do this. They require us to be able to sit with them in this place of being like, hey, like I would like access to your sling, I would like access to your hind, I would like access to all these muscles, which means you have to turn off your protector muscles. So you have to turn off your brachiosphalicus and your iliopsoas group, which means I have to provide a safe space for you. What a beautiful gem of the art of horsemanship, right? To have that be the requirement. And I understand that it bothers a lot of people, and those people just should, you know, maybe not have horses. I don't know. It's just, it is an art form through and through, and it is one that we are endlessly chasing. And I screw up at it all the time, dude. There are days that I go out and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna work with my horses. This just happened. I was filming all weekend. I'm filming my courses, and I had like the night from hell. Had a really rough morning. I was very sick. Because we're supposed to have that podcast on Wednesday, and I was still not feeling super hot. But it was like Catherine flew up, and we had the photographer, and we had the horses, and we had the rider, and we had everybody there. And I'm like, I can't not do this, right? Like, we have to show up. And I go out there and I go to like work with the horse to do this thing. And I'm like, I am the furthest thing from pillar one personally that I could possibly be. This poor animal is not going to go into it. It was cool was that we got to get footage of me being like, and here's an example of when you put the horse away, right? It's not because I'm not a great horseman. I could have manipulated all kinds of shit, but you cannot manipulate pillar one. And I was not capable of regulating myself enough in that moment. So I had to go and have some tacos and sit down for a minute. And then I came back 2 hours later and I was better. But that's, this is my business and I still do it. So,
yeah. I'm glad tacos are your medicine as well.
Oh, God. So good.
So good. Yeah. Yeah. Like today I was having a hard morning and I was like, I just know that there's taco stuff in the fridge for me when I get home. And that just makes it all okay. I'm okay.
Okay. Yep. True story.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Food is love. Food is love. Can I ask you a super geeky question before we finish?
Totally.
Okay. Yeah. So so you just alluded to this connection between brachiocephalicus and iliopsoas. And of course, iliopsoas is a thing even in human body work. And we have the rail of the kidney. And of course, it's integrated in this whole survival response. But for you, how does the iliopsoas show up within the pillars specifically? That's a piece that I haven't quite got my head wrapped around yet.
Totally. Okay. So pull up a picture of a horse. So again, playing into more like the nervous system connections. So the iliopsoas, and this is the same for humans. So our scalenes actually operate more, or like our SCM and scalenes work very similarly to the horse's brachiocephalicus. Are you a human body worker too?
I am. I'm an osteopath.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, perfect. Okay. So this makes sense. So I feel like the scalene, so a lot of my equine knowledge and like how I came about doing like nerve release on them, I got from my human knowledge, right? So none of this I learned in the equine. I love the school that I went to, but they don't talk about a lot of this stuff. So I had to really take my human anatomy books and all the skills with that and be like, why don't we talk about thoracic outlet syndrome? Why don't we talk about sciatica? Why don't we talk about that's so weird. So anyway, when we're playing within the nervous system, what I have found, and again, this is on palpation. So when I started playing with pillar one and I realized that like Dragon being in pillar one made him more sound in front, I also found it fascinating that it made him more sound in the hind. And I thought that maybe it was because, and I do think that part of this is true, part of it is because when you turn off the brachiocephalicus, the horse actually can get more extension out of it, which is why there's no way it is an extender, because the horses can extend more. So if he could extend more in the front, then he could extend more in the hind, which that innately might have helped a little bit of the soundness stuff. But as I started palpating him, so again, like I put my hands all over their body and make sure like what's going on before and after, the tension over his iliopsoas was completely night and day after we would do 5 or 10 minutes of pillar one walking. And so was his hamstrings. And then his quads would be quite warm. And so what I've learned, so pillar one is a full body thing. My favorite misconception is everybody thinks that I just developed the thoracic sling. And I'm like, oh, honey, it's the whole thing. It's okay. You can think that. It's fine. So pillar one walking, what it does is it signals for the brachiocephalicus to turn off, which also signals for the iliopsoas to turn off because they're both protector muscles. So they work together. And the iliopsoas is not so restricted, as well as the hamstrings, because all that ties in each other. When the iliopsoas and the hamstrings aren't restricted, the diaphragm can actually release. So we get a diaphragm release. When the brachiocephalicus lets go, we get more flow through the vagus nerve, right? Yeah. So we've got that. It signals for the way that the brachiocephalicus ties into the shoulders, it collapses everything in. So when it lets go, the shoulders can open. So now we have a decompression of the brachial plexus on both sides. It also kicks on the ventral line of the horse and kind of allows for the top line to truly come on. I have found that the longissimus muscle and the iliopsoas tend to work in opposition of each other. So a lot of the horses will get that weird like bump thing because when there's usually more psoas and the longissimus is trying to get online and it can't, it's like right over the, it's my technical term. I'm glad that you're like, yes, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I totally get it.
So when we turn off the iliopsoas, we're also turning then on the longissimus and the trapezius and everything online. So that's why, so personally, so it's a full body workout for the horse. So I'll get the horse into pillar one. We'll do pillar one walking. I try to get a really big activated walk out of them. So that really getting that fired on. It's okay if they're like lollygagging, but like now we have access to the right muscles. Let's get to work. So like I'll use a cookie or something to like get them kind of up and into it. And you'll have to play with this with your body work horses, but I will tell you, you take horses out. So I'll do this in the nerve release courses that I teach. You take a horse out, palpate them, do it once over, get your before photo, go walk them in pillar 1, activated chasing a cookie, bribe them, whatever, for about 5 minutes, straight lines particularly, and then go back and take a picture and or palpate them again. And then you tell me what you find in your bodies. And it's really rad. And it also saves your own body because now the body is properly warmed up. A bunch of the compensatory patterns that you were going to manually just spend an hour digging out went away. And the body is receptive or in receiving energy. So you get that, like, God, you get so much more done so much faster. So good.
I bet. Well, you know, honestly, even when I'm working in osteopathy, a big part of my work is just like warming up the system. Like I just like jiggle and wiggle and just like kind of, okay, like, you know, first, because I'm like,
get it online so it can
completely, I want everything activated and working and paying attention. And then honestly, most of my job is done just through that. And then I can actually see what's occurring,
what you're working with.
For sure. Sure. That's super cool. The psoas always gets me thinking, diaphragm, like, you know, kidney. It's just, there's so much going on in there.
And all of those organs. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. When we think diaphragm, it's everything, you know, having this like pumping and moving and then all our blood movement. Yeah. So that's super helpful for me. Thank you. I appreciate that. Cause that was one piece I was like, oh, I'm not quite there yet. So that helps a lot. Wanting to start to wrap up our time together. I can't believe that's been an hour.
I know. I'm pretty sure we could talk for like 3 or 4. It would be good.
I definitely think so. Many more questions, but I will rein it in literally here. And I'm just really appreciative for your generosity today, Celeste. This has been really, really amazing.
You're so welcome. Yeah, no, I love it. I love talking about this stuff. Yeah, it's so cool.
It really is. It really is. It's really, you know, I know how I'm feeling about it and the sense of that it's created this whole new lens for me to kind of envision, you know, various things with my own horses and the others I work with. And I'm sure that's the same for others that are embarking on this journey or that have been working with the pillars. So many horses say thank you.
I love it. It's an ongoing thing. And the cool thing is we're always learning new stuff along the way, right? Like last year I really dove into feet and like, so now I look at feet or I have specialists that will help me as well with that and trying to take more of the whole horse into consideration. And there's always something more to learn. So.
Oh my gosh. I know that was like my whole other line of questioning. So maybe another time we can get into that.
Totally. Oh God. I mean, I only know enough to be annoying, just so we're clear. Like I'm currently trimming my own horse's feet, which is, I mean, like that's a whole other thing where I'm like, oh my God. So now playing around with like what exercises and what restrictions are easier or harder for them because of like how they have to stand and like, God, there's just so many more things that come up when you're doing your own horse's feet. But yeah, it's extremely important. Like I did that webinar with Yogi, the equine documentalist, and we were talking about sciatica and the hamstrings, and he was showing me before and afters of him fixing NPA in behinds. And when a horse goes NPA in the hinds, they have to use their hamstrings, so then they have to use their iliopsoas, so then they have to use their brachiocephalicus. And so you see this tension pattern go from the back end up. And so then here's these people, for instance, like trying to do pillar 1 over and over and over again, but like it doesn't work because the horses can't fully let go, but they can't let go because their underlying pathology now is the hoof and the balance there. And so it really, I mean, there's just not teeth, all of it.
Teeth. Oh my God. Yes.
A whole other thing.
Absolutely. For another time, for sure.
Another time.
Yeah. This is wonderful. Just a starting point. And I hope that those out there that are listening, that are in Masterclass or interested about it, got just like a little bit more of a view into this work, and potentially it's kind of catching your interest. So how do they get more information about your Masterclass and your other work right now?
Yeah, I mean, right now, all of it is launched on the new website, which I'm super excited about. So balanceandmovementmethod.com. And you can see how to book with trainers for distance sessions. You can check out the upcoming courses that are coming on. All of this podcast as well will be listed on it. There's a media page that's got all the different interviews and things. The masterclass is on there as well for people to join in on. And that's just a really fun, there are no how-to videos. You won't come in and be like, boom, 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 this is how to do it, because hopefully you've heard from throughout this. It's a little tricky to just do that. But there are many hours of lecture where we go into the who sits and the what sits and the whys behind all of that to really give you guys the aha moments. There is a lot of example videos of what the different colors look like in some different horses. So you do have an idea of what you're going for, but it might look different for your horse, and that's okay. And then there's a community of people of about, what's it at, like 2,500. There's a lot. There's a decent amount of people there now. But the cool thing is you can post your progress videos and your questions in the group. So a lot of people will post like, hey, we practiced pillar 1 today. What does it look like? And one of our experts will get on there and will comment and we'll mark up and say yes, no, whatever. So you do get that feedback right there. And then you also get to see the feedback as somebody that's hanging out in the group being like, oh, okay. And so that it's like an ongoing, it's just, there's so much education in that group.
So much going on in there. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So
awesome.
It's cool. It's a good self-study. And if you don't learn that way and you just want to go straight to the chase, like just book a one-on-one with somebody and we'll give you that all of our heart and soul.
Yeah. Tara, I'm going to be booking in with her.
Oh my gosh. I know. She was so sweet. I have to give a little blip and a shout out to Tara, because she was like, she was so worried that she wouldn't make an impact via distance sessions. And she's just made a huge impact. She's absolutely, it's just mind-boggling. Yeah, she called me. She was just like, I just helped 3 horses and I didn't think I could do it, and it's so good. And I was like, and I'm just getting like hordes of people being like, she's a goddess. And I'm like, I know, trust me, they all are.
Yes,
so good.
Absolutely.
I got the best team.
I was gonna say, you got a good crew.
I got awesome. A good crew. All right, darling.
It's
You're
been
so
awesome.
Okay.
Yay. Thanks everybody for listening in, and we'll chat with you again very soon.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks for listening, everyone. We have some exciting news. Myself and Elise Miki, who you may have heard here on the podcast, have developed a 3-level equine cranial therapy certification program that has now been approved by the NAMBICAM. And this program has 2 pathways. First, online only continuing education pathway, as well as an online and live practicum certification pathway. And we're so excited about all the things that we're going to be able to share with you around the world. And if you've been wanting to learn more about effectively working with the nervous system to help resolve chronic issues in terms of musculoskeletal, anxiety, and other things in your equine clients, we would love to work with you. To learn more, head to equilibriatherapeutics.com/equine-craniosacral, or you can email me at alexa@alexalinton.com. I hope to see you there.